Now I'm going to get ready to show you. I'm pretty much going to tell you a story just like I might as if you were in class. Before we get to that though, I want you to see this is my teaching area. It's good if you have something that's up a little higher so all your kids can see, but if your group is smaller, a table works fine, or even if you have a good chair that you can prop things up on if you're going to be sitting with the kids. But once again, it's important, make sure you have somewhere where you're going to be able to have your pieces ready to grab. You're going to have somewhere where you can set it up where the children can see, but where it's not going to be in their reach because they're cool and they're neat and the kids are going to want to reach out and touch. And that's a no-no. These are our teachers' teaching tools. When you get ready to tell your story, remember that, first of all, when telling the story, remember your pieces are actors. This guy is just a crowd person today, but last week he might have been John the Baptist. And the week before he might have been Jacob and Esau. So don't focus too much on what the pieces look like. We don't need to spend 5 minutes going, oh, and he was wearing this red robe, and can you see how he's holding out? No. You're creating a background picture as a visual, but we're not going to walk our people around. We're not going to spend 10 minutes describing their clothes. Because like I said, he's just a background person today, but last week he might have been Jacob. And if you spend too much time focusing on what the people in your picture look like, the next week your kids are going to be like, oh look, it's Jacob from our story last week. And it's going to get confusing. So when you're building your scene for your story, remember it's a picture. But it's a picture. It's not a play. All right? Now, one thing I like to do when I tell the story is I'll start off with my blank background. Go ahead, have your scene set up, but keep your people and any other pieces you can waiting for you. Because it's very interesting for the kids, as you'll see, if you can set up your scene while you're talking. Because there's things that get revealed and it's something new for them to look at and to see. And it helps draw them in and it helps catch their attention. And it helps tie your words in to what you're communicating. So build your scene in front of your kids and get them involved. If it's raining in the story, have them make raining sounds. If it's David and Goliath is shouting at David, have the kids shout with you. Involve them. Don't just be a talking head showing them a picture. Make it entertaining. That's pretty much what you're doing. You are an entertainer because otherwise your children will be bouncing off the walls. You have to keep them entertained. So you want to make sure in whatever little way you can think of to draw them into the story that you're telling. And a great way to do that is to build your scene with your flannel characters as you're speaking. And on that note, we're going to get ready to tell the story of the crucifixion and the resurrection. Now, we read about in the Bible, boys and girls, about all the things that Jesus had been doing. He had been going throughout the cities, teaching people about God's love and teaching them how God wanted to love them. And there were many people who did not like what Jesus was teaching. They weren't happy with how he was trying to change things. And so they got together and they decided that they were going to get rid of Jesus. They came to him in the night, and one of his disciples betrayed him. And they arrested him. They sent soldiers to arrest him, and they brought him in for a trial. And Jesus stood before them, and the high priests, they sat and they started to accuse him. They said, "Who are you to say that you're God? Who are you to say that we shouldn't pay taxes to Caesar?" And they started telling all sorts of lies about him. The Bible says that the priests hired people to come in and say that Jesus told us to do this. Jesus told us to do that. Jesus told us to break the law. Jesus is here to overthrow Rome. Jesus says we don't have to obey Caesar. Jesus has blasphemed against God. And as the people came and they accused him of all these things, the Bible says that Jesus stood there and he was silent. He did not answer a single word. And finally, the priests, getting so frustrated, they looked at him and they said, "Don't you see what these men are saying about you? Don't you hear their words? Is it or is it not true that you say you are the Son of God?" And Jesus, he answered them and he said, "If authority had not been given to you by my Father above, I would not be standing here in front of you." And the Bible says that when the priests heard that, they tore their clothes and got all upset, and they said, "You see? You hear what he said? He has blasphemed God. He must be killed. We must put him to death." Now, they could not order someone to be put to death themselves. They had to go to the governor of Rome. Now, the governor of Rome at that time was a man named Pontius Pilate. Pilate was in charge of Israel. And so the high priests, they came and they brought Jesus before Pilate. And they told him all the things that they had accused Jesus of. And now Pilate had heard about Jesus. He had heard about all the things he had been teaching. He remembered Jesus coming into Jerusalem and all the people waving palm branches and cheering for him and worshiping him. And now they brought Jesus before him bound and asking for him to be crucified. So Pilate took Jesus and he questioned him. And as he questioned him, he said, "Don't you know that I have the power to free you or kill you?" He said, "Aren't you going to answer what these men are saying to you?" But after he questioned him, Pilate knew that Jesus had not broken any law. So Pilate, he came before the people and he said, "I have found no wrong in this man. I'm going to let him go." And the people said, "No, we don't want him. Crucify him. It's your job. He's broken our laws." And Pilate said, "Well, it's the week of the Passover. I'm allowed to release one prisoner to you. Let me release Jesus to you." But the people cried out. They said, "No, don't release Jesus to us. Give us Barnabas." Barnabas was a prisoner who was a murderer. He was a thief. He had killed people. But the people, the crowds, they cried out. They said, "We don't want Jesus. Give us Barnabas." So Pilate, last of all, he said, "Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take Jesus. I'm going to beat him. And then I'm going to let him go. He has done no wrong." So Pilate, he ordered the soldiers to take Jesus. And they stripped him of his shirt and they tied him to a post. And they beat him. And they beat him over and over again with a whip. The Bible tells us that Jesus took that beating on his back so that we could be healed of our diseases. And they beat Jesus until he was bloody and hurt, and they brought him back in. And Pilate said, here's Jesus. He's been punished. He's been beaten. Now I'm going to let him go." And the people said, "No, don't release Jesus. Give us Barnabas." And Pilate asked the people, "Then what am I supposed to do with Jesus?" And they started to cry, "Crucify him. Crucify him. Crucify him. Kill Jesus." And Pilate, when he saw that he could not change their mind, the Bible says he called for a basin of water and he dipped his hands in it and washed. And he said, "Do you see my hands? My hands are clean. This man's blood is on you." And the people said, "Fine, let his blood be on us. We don't care. We want Jesus crucified." And so Pilate, he ordered Jesus to be taken away. And they took him and they started marching him through the streets of Jerusalem.